What's going on, Lions fans? Welcome to the Pride of Detroit YouTube channel. My name is Miko, joined once again with my guy Morgan Cannon, and this is your go-to place for all things Lions related. That includes news, updates, analysis, and so much more. In today's video, we are going to be talking about a pretty unique topic in regards to one of the Lions' key cornerstone players and what exactly they should probably look to do with him going forward. Morgan, when it comes down to wide receiver Jameson Williams, I think it's pretty safe to say that like he's a beloved, you know, player on this team, right? I think at this point in time, especially coming off the season he just had, like a lot of people are buying a lot more stock in JMO. He was, actually healthy for a larger proportion of the season, was available for a larger portion of the season, and really rewarded the team and the fans, with his production, going for over 1,000 yards for the first time in his career, putting up 7 touchdowns, and being that explosive player that I think the Lions thought they were getting when they decided to trade up from 32 all the way up to 12 and draft him, all those seasons ago. So it's kind of interesting when you start to see things happen in the NFL where guys are starting to get paid, right? Whether because it's free agency or guys getting extended. And the thought really crossed my mind when I saw the T. Higgins and Jamar Chase deals get done. And it really just kind of hit me of like, while I'm not saying JMO's yet to the level of a T. Higgins, I did at least have to start questioning, like, could the Lions actually afford to keep JMO and St. Brown, if they both continue the trajectory that they're on, where they're constantly improving season after season?
Yeah, it's been a fun exercise. So I dove into it and started to look around like other case studies. Obviously Philly. And now you got Cincinnati to look at. You had Miami for a little bit there with two top paid receivers. And there's ways to do it. Obviously, like you look at the Eagles, right? Like it's like a catch-22, right? Like yeah, they just won the Super
Mm-hmm.
Bowl. They had two top 10 paid receivers as it stood before the Chase and Higgins deals with Devontae Smith and AJ Brown. They're both in top 10 of AAV. You had a top paid running back, obviously, with Barkley, even before his new deal, the one he got out of free agency.
Yep.
So it's definitely, it's possible. But then you look at it like the Eagles just had a mass exodus, man. They lost. Yeah, they brought back Bond and a few others, but Milton Williams is gone, Sweat's gone. It was a big exodus, but it's how you have to operate when your team, like if you're Howie Roseman or you're Brad Holmes, and you've drafted well for consecutive years, like cornerstones, like not everybody has to be a Panay Sewell or Amon Ra, but like your contributors, your Derek Barnes, your guys like that make up part of your core, even if they're not all pro players. So it was a fun exercise because it's a really fascinating like study with like roster construction, right? And that's why you hear these GMs and football executives talk about like, yeah, we're drafting for that year, but we're also drafting for future years for places that we know, like we talked about the last video, that we might need to get a little younger and a little cheaper, right?
Yeah, and I think I like how you pointed out the other teams that have done this really well. I think by looking at Miami and Philly, I do think you get like tales of two different tales of that tape, right? Where like you have a situation in Philly where they seem to have done it fairly well, where they found ways to be able to pay both of their top tier receivers and a top tier running back, but have made sure that they've subsidized other aspects of their team where they, like you said, where they've been able to either stay young or stay cheap, but still have impact players on those other areas. And then you look at a team like Miami, maybe didn't do it nearly as well, right? Maybe a little too focused on just making sure that guys were getting paid when you look at Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. Not saying that those guys weren't deserving of those contracts, but you look at how the rest of their roster is still not quite built out, and there's still a number of holes that they have to fill. And they've been going about it through like, having to trade for like players, like when they trade for Bradley Chubb and things of that nature. Like they're having to find more creative ways of building out their roster because they've handed out too much money too soon to players that are, again, skill players. And not saying that they weren't deserving of those contracts, but it is just a situation that you look at and you're just like, man, two teams both were able to pay their guys. One team is competing for Super Bowls, the other team is still trying to figure out how to get back into the playoffs year after year. There's obviously some other nuances that go into that when you start talking about quarterbacks, coaches, defense as a whole. But I think when you look at the Lions, that's what kind of gives me hope in some of the things that you're saying about, like, hey, the Lions still do have that same mindset that the Eagles do, where it is build through the draft. And I think that is the thing that's going to make it easier, should I say, when they get to the negotiation table with JMO and it's like, hey, okay, what do you want versus what you're actually like valued at based off of your production and things of that nature. But I think there still has to be that question of based off of what JMO has done. Granted, he's coming off his best season by far. Is he actually worth giving that extension to? I think when we talk about Hutch, when we talk about Kirby, even when we talk about BB, and BB's still like 2 years away from getting a new deal. Like there are certain guys where we're like no brainers, absolutely re-sign them, whatever they want, top of the market, reset the market with those guys. JMO is always the one that I feel like we always kind of get hung up on of like, but is he worth it? And I think that's more like, I don't know. I'm just kind of curious to see, like, do you think at this point JMO's worth that long-term investment if we're talking about a 3 to 4 year extension?
So I love Jameson Williams, man. Like does a lot in the city. He's always around here on the east side. I really love him, but I want to see 1 year. Like if he goes crazy this year, right? So we're looking at JMO. Let's set the table a little bit. 2022 draft pick. Everybody knows they traded up from 32 to 12. Shout out Kwesi over there in Minnesota for that one. They got Lewis Seen. Lions got Jameson Williams. Cool. So Jameson was a first round pick, 2022, 23, 24, 25. So we're in the fourth year of his rookie deal. And most of y'all probably know, but first round picks have that 5th year team option, right? So his 5th year team option would be 2026. So if he goes in 2025 and he doesn't, no suspensions, no silly stuff, and like puts up numbers and was the playmaker he was last year and like builds upon it, you got to pay him because you don't let that player, you don't let that kind of athlete, that kind of talent leave your building. And he's just part of the core that you're moving forward with, right? You're adding him to the Panay, Amon-Ra, Hutch, etc. bubble, right? Like I think Kirby's going to be added in there, BB for sure, and there's some other ones. So like the Eagles, that's what. Shout out to really good timing, but Greg of Philly Cover Corner. So Jeremy Reisman, producer at Pride of Detroit. If you guys aren't familiar with Pride of Detroit Direct, wrote a really awesome article that, got to our inboxes. He's, obviously the staff, we get it for free. And it's basically breaking down the Lions core, right? And like how things can be spread out. It's a really, really in-depth look. If you want more of that, do the little free trial thing, check it out. Well worth it, especially if you like this kind of cap content that we've been making lately. But Greg for Philly Cover Corner wrote a really good article, and like even he really did a good job with like organizing the data. So he talks about like the core of the Eagles roster, right? In 2025, the Eagles core consumes 44% of the available salary cap. And then in 2026, jumps up to 51%. And he was like, both very manageable numbers. And it is, because that's really how these elite rosters get maintained. You have like your 10 to 15, 16, 17 dudes that like, all right, this is where the success is built around. Like we've heard Brad and Dan talk about it, the pillars, right? The Panays and the Saints and all them.
Yep.
That number's fine, right? And you start adding players. And I really liked just some of the points he made in there. I'm not going to read it verbatim because I want y'all to go read it. But you look at the Lions 21, 22, and 23 classes. That's the basis of what got this organization from where they were at the end of the Patricia Quinn era to where we are now, to where they're a bona fide championship contender year in and year out, right? Like we're about to be entering the second season in a row where people are like, yeah, the Lions are going to be firmly in the mix for the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
The goal will be like for the 2024 class, Terrion, Ennis, it's still, we'll see. Hopefully those get added to the core too. Then you're really cooking. So yeah, the goal will be to keep that together as long as you can so that Brad and the brass can keep their core together and just keep things moving, right? So Howie Roseman dropped this is a bar. When you draft well, you have young, cost control players who allow you to keep your core together. If you don't, you're always chasing. So that point set that flag off in my mind, Miko, when you talked about the Miami thing. They've hit some places. I don't even know who their GM is. I like the coach, Mike, McDonald. There's too many McDonald's now. McDaniel, sorry.
McDaniels.
Yeah, McDaniels. There's too many of the McD names, and I'm Irish. I can say that. So, like, yeah, if you're always chasing, and in my opinion, like that's where Miami got it a little bit wrong, right? Like, I'm not a Tua hater, but the offense is a little gimmicky. Folks figured things out, and that's where you got, but. They've tried to make, the Bears right now, right? These teams that are going hard in the paint and free agency. Yes, it might give them a little boost that year, but it rarely gives you success beyond the like immediacy. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
you look around, that these teams that are uber talented, they're not going crazy in free agency, man. They rarely ever do, just because it's just the nature of the finances, right? So like, yeah, like they can extend JMO. I think it's firmly on the table. Like if he balls out in 2025 and does what he did plus a little something, you're gonna have to. And then I know we're going to get into some of the cap gymnastics that can be done, but it's possible, right? You can definitely do it.
Yeah, I think like you said at the end there, it's definitely possible, and I think whether or not you should is kind of dependent on that 2025 season. Now, again, because they have that fifth year option, you could technically push that out to 2026 in the event that let's just say again injuries happen or things like that. Like, sure, you can continue to like kick that ball down the court a little bit just to give him that more like that additional cushion. But ideally, yeah, you want to see JMO go into 2025 ball out like he did this past season when he was finally back from suspension and things like that, and not have any suspensions, not have any off the field type of issues, so that it makes it that much easier to go to the negotiation table and pay him, that you're not necessarily waiving that fifth year option because you're just like, hey, it's not worth the investment and things like that. I think when you talk about skill set, like that's almost like a given, right? Like we've seen it when he's on the field, what he brings to this offense and how this offense is elevated. And it's not just like, oh, well, you can go out and get a speedster anywhere. Because I feel like someone's going to jump in the comments and be like, oh, you can. There's always a fast dude in the draft, but not every fast player,
As a
right?
football
Like not
player,
everyone, right? Not everyone that runs a blazing 40 is out there blocking, is out there, really competing. And like we saw this past season, and even a little bit in 2023 as well, JMO's getting that much better catching those intermediate routes and being able to make
taking
plays
hits,
in
yeah,
right, making plays in that part of the game and not just being the deep threat. So it takes what he's already doing and really starts to magnify the fact that like, yeah, his game has started to grow and he started to become that much better of a player for this Lions offense. So for me personally, I'm kind of right there with you where it's from a set standpoint, for me, it's a no-brainer. I do understand though there is this element of it where it's like he just has to go through a season where there's just no headlines. Like
yeah,
preferably nothing that is going to detract and make you think that it would be a poor investment if you give him, upwards of 70, 80, 90 million dollars, in a contract. So talking about that aspect of it, you mentioned the financial gymnastics of it all. And I think that is where things are going to get interesting because you talked about, the Lions possibly needing to have that core of 10, 15 players, and like those are your cornerstones. I do think JMO fits in that window because when you start talking about those core players, at least off the top of my head, you have Penei Sewell, you have Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jared Goff, Aleem McNeil. Those guys have been paid. Derek Barnes, I'd probably even throw him in there, and he's been paid. The other guys that you're talking about, though, that are still like kind of wait and see, or again, just pending, is Kirby, is JMO, is Hutch, Terrion possibly, BB, Laporta, Jameer. Like you get up to like what's that, like 8, 9, 10 guys already. That's where things start to get interesting. And so you put together a really good graphic of just kind of like how this money is already kind of being dispersed through some of the top earners and what it could possibly look like when you start to add the likes of maybe Kirby and JMO into the mix here.
yep. And from Jeremy's article, like I liked it. I think I would agree with him. He has 17 core players for the Lions, and it takes up approximately 56% of the cap. That's fine. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, that's 17 players, and it's, the likely suspects. But here I included the four big ones that we already know of, right? The ink is dry on those deals, right, Miko? Penei,
Yeah.
Amon-Ra, Jared, and Aleem. Now, the first thing people are probably going to lose their minds about are some of these numbers associated with old Mr. Jared, okay? Those numbers can come down. Okay, that's typical practice. 2026 is almost certainly when some of these restructures and just cap cuts are going to happen. Like their veterans might be, asking to take a pay cut or just be released. And then there's going to be veterans like Goff who will going to like probably convert some of his base salary to signing bonus, lowering that number for the like salary cap purposes, but that'll be tacked on to the end of the deal. So just to start, if the Lions were to convert 52 million of Goff's like 54 base salary in 2025, it would immediately free up another $39 million in cap space, but that 39 doesn't go away. It adds 13 million to each of the remaining 3 years of Goff's deal, right? So that's something you can think about right now, and they'll most certainly convert some of that 2026 number to a signing bonus just to get it lowered a little bit, give them a little more wiggle room. But the rest of it, pretty standard with Panay's deal, Saints deal, and then Aleem's, right? Like it's all balanced. And for Kirby Joseph, we used, Jeremy did it too. He used like Antoine Winfield Jr.'s extension. So just like loosely, that number could be different than 8 million in 2026. It'll be up to what they see fit. And then for Jameson, we used the Devontae Smith extension that he signed back in 2024. So not that long ago, coming off his rookie deal. It was like 3 years, 75 million with like 30 something guaranteed, if I'm not mistaken. So you look at it here, right? This is just 5 players. And in 2026, that's a good chunk of change, right, Miko? Like what's the math there?
Bruh, I wish I could do that math for you that quickly. It's a lot. I can just tell you that much. It's a lot. And this doesn't even include Hutch's potential deal, which is probably you're going to be looking at another, 29 to 30 mil, average each year. And I think that's where things like, again, people are going to look at that and be like, that's a ton of money. Where are they getting this money from? First and foremost, like you've said in so many other videos, the cap goes up as the NFL is becoming more and more popular and they're getting more and more money in these TV deals. The salary cap continues to go up. The second thing is, like you mentioned with Jared Goff, the first person that's going to have to be in line to restructure their deal is the dude that's close to $70 million in 2026. You're the first person in line that we're going to ask to take a pay cut because you just have the most money that you can have come off of your books and still be fine. No one's going to feel bad for you in the locker room if your cap number has to come down from 69 million to, like you were even 50. Saying, if it comes down, to 50 or 45 or something like that, like you're still making good bank.
Yeah. And he'll get that later on. He'll get that, it'll just be tacked on and he's going to get paid that because once it becomes a prorated bonus, like we've talked about, that money is guaranteed unless he does something contract detrimental, blah, 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 something like that. So he'll get that's why guys are always like, okay, I'll take that signing bonus, no problem, because then it's guaranteed. You know what I'm saying? So I don't think that won't be an issue at all. And it gives teams wiggle room. And that salary cap, and the Lions aren't the only one doing this, guys. Like a lot of them, like the Eagles got a boatload of voided years on some of their big old contracts, like the Hurts deal and all those. Like it's just something, it's a common practice now in the NFL. I think I saw someone comment like, oh, we keep doing that, we're going to be the Saints. Nah, baby, listen, the Saints have been doing this for like a long, 10 plus years because they tried to keep that window open forever during the Sean Payton, Drew Brees era. So they've been doing it, man. That's an extreme example. I trust the Lions for managing it. Go ahead, bro.
Well, I was going to say, and it's also just a matter of you have to also know when to let go of players, right? Like you have to be able to know hey, this player is no longer worth paying. And that's why Morgan and I continue to say in each of these videos, you're going to see some faces probably leave or possibly get traded or whatever the case may be, just because the Lions have to look big picture. And if you're drafting well, and I think that's another thing that kind of doomed the Saints. If you want to talk about, well, they just kept kicking the can down the road. Kicking the can down the road wouldn't have hurt them as bad if they were drafting well. If you're not doing that part on top of the fact that now you're forced to pay your guys because the developmental talent that you drafted isn't hitting at the clip that you thought they would. Well, now you just have to keep shelling out money. So that's another reason why, again, we continue to talk about, and I at least believe that's why Brad Holmes prioritizes the draft. It's not because he's afraid of free agency. It's not because he's afraid to pay big money. Everything has to get looked at in this big picture concept. And I think JMO fits right in there where he's a guy that I think should be seen as one of those cornerstone players, one of those guys that the Lions are going to try, again, if he continues to stay out of trouble, if he continues to produce on the field, which producing on the field is my least of my concerns. And I think it's the least of anybody's concerns. It is just a matter of man, can we just get one season where it's not a single headline, where it's not even speculated that he did anything, because that's going to make it so much easier that when they come to the table, you can offer him, you can start with that Devontae Smith type of deal, right? Maybe it goes up a little bit here or there, but
Doable.
like you've mentioned before, right? Like you've mentioned before, the salary cap is so fluid and you can like literally set it up in such a way where the thing that you're really focused on is your cap number. Like it's not how much the contract is that's signed for, it's how much is your cap, what does your cap look like year to year? And if the Lions can continue to structure that well, then they'll continue to be, on the track of being a consistently, top tier organization and top tier roster.
Yeah, it's just about like we've talked about, man. Like what the Eagles are doing. If yes, you have your expensive core guys that you have to pay because they're premium players at the position, and then you got to have people contributing on rookie deals. Like, to be honest, the Lions need like the Terrion Arnolds and the Anish Drake Straws and like to hit. And if like the Manu pick hits, bro, you know what I'm saying? Like if Manu turns into
Yeah.
like a Mailata performer for 2 years there at the end, well, shoot, because then you got a cheap left tackle or wherever. Maybe you move Panay over there. Whereas right
Mm-hmm.
now you have two expensive tackles, and I love Taylor Decker. He's earned all that money, and I'm glad he's getting it. So that's where you just supplement like the expensive for the value bin, and that value bin can still be really productive. And I wanted to correct myself. I did misspeak earlier with Goff. So the 55 million. So that is the 2026 number. Goff's base salary in 2026 is 55. So
Okay.
what Jeremy was saying there, if they converted 52 million of that base salary into signing bonus, that would free up the 39 million in space, and that's 13 over the remaining 3 years of his deal. So that's something they could do. They can add more voided years. There's ways around it, like you said. So yeah, I'm right there with you. Like if JMO can just I hope that last thing was a wake up call, bro. The thing that happened over by my house that he didn't get charged
Yeah.
for when you got that happened right by my house, guys. Over here, I like as soon as I saw the background, I was like, shoot, I know exactly where he is. Uh, so I really do. I hope that was a wake up call because it's a slippery slope, man. And I like Jameson. I think he's a really good kid. And I hope he knows he's like just another consistent season away from like some life changing generational wealth money. So I expect him to keep his nose clean. I expect another crazy year with some more juice. And I don't like when people try to pigeonhole him as like he's a gimmicky deep threat. He proved he was a complete receiver last year, bro. Like that. I go back all the time to that pass he caught against the Texans, I want to say, when he got sandwiched. It was like bam,
Yes.
bam. Like that looked like it hurt. And Jameson he's muscular, but he's a skinny dude. All right now. Like he doesn't got a lot of
Yeah.
a lot of padding. So I'm a big JMO fan, man. I really do expect him to be in the fold. And he does everything like you talked about, the blocking, tough catches. Like he's all effort all the time. And I think it took a little bit of time to buy into like being a professional, like being a pro football player, but he did it. And it's just another testament to the organization and the culture of Detroit, bro. Like it's just, I
Well,
believe in it.
and it goes to show that Detroit was well founded, right? When it comes down to drafting him, I get like the hiccups make it like questionable. Like, well, what did they think? What did they see? But when you hear Dan talk about him, after a situation that happened this past season, and he's not wavering in his belief of JMO. When you hear his teammates and the way his teammates talk about him, like it's always like praising him for his hard work, praising him for buying in, and all of these types of things. I'm right there with you. You hope that this past season was the wake up call he needed because he has so much potential, and I think he's like this past season was literally just scratching the surface of that. 2025 can be everything that he wants it to be, and I'm really excited to see what type of player he turns into. But that's pretty much just our opinion on the matter, guys. This is an opportunity for you guys to jump into the comment section if you haven't already been in there and let us know what you guys think. Do you think Jameson Williams is worth giving that extension, the same way that we talk about Kirby and Aiden Hutchinson? Or do you think that the Lions should maybe wait a little bit longer or pass altogether? Let us know that in the comment section below. If you want to know any more, if you want to keep up with any more additional Lions content, all you have to do is head over to prideofdetroit.com. And like Morgan mentioned earlier, we do have Pride of Detroit Direct. That is a paid subscription that will get you access to additional Lions content, both written and video form. So if you are interested in that, I believe there's a link in our description that'll take you to where you can sign up for that. Like Morgan said, there is like a 7-day free trial. After that, it's a certain amount of money for the year, not monthly. You pay yearly, and it's actually a pretty fair price considering enjoying the content that you get throughout the course of the year. So if you're interested in that, link is in the description. You can definitely check that out as well. And if you want to stay locked into any more additional Lions content that we are putting out over here on YouTube, all you have to do is hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell. That makes it so much easier for you to find our content in the future. But with all that said, I'm Miko. He's Morgan. Thank you guys for taking the time to watch, and we'll catch you guys in the next one.